I'm Sabrina, and I'm going to share with you a tale that altered my entire perspective on family ties at the age of 37. Our family wasn't wealthy while I was growing up, but we managed. Dad kept working, anticipating his retirement in 2 years, but Mom took an early retirement owing to health concerns. Then there is Sheila, my sister, who is the pride of our parents and 12 years younger than I am. I got a good job after graduation and moved in with Mark, my boyfriend. Like me, he is pragmatic, which is perhaps why we got along so well. I was already building my job and considering the future of our family while Sheila was completing her undergraduate education. Mark would periodically remark, you don't have to keep supporting them, when he observed me moving funds to my parents' account. They're adults too. Look, I'm no kid, and they need help. I would usually reply, shaking my head. I want them to have a nicer retirement home because their current one is dilapidated. The ancient, dilapidated two-story house where I was raised was starting to cause major problems. I hired several contractors to evaluate the damage last winter. I can still see the expression on the head contractor's face as he shook his head and went through each room. Ma'am, he added, pointing to the major structural problems and water damage, fixing this would cost more than building new. You'd be throwing good money after bad. At that point, I came to a choice that, at the time, seemed very reasonable. In order to assist my parents in purchasing a new home, I created a joint savings account with them. Saving $200,000, selling their previous house, and purchasing a secure and pleasant retirement home were the clear objectives. I contributed a sizable amount of my monthly income to that joint account, and I saw the balance gradually increase to $50,000 and $100,000. Every accomplishment seemed like a step toward providing my parents with the stability they were due. I didn't mind that Mark and I lived simply and put off our own aspirations to own a home. After all, family comes first. It was an ordinary Sunday family meal, until Sheila caught everyone's attention by clearing her throat. I can still clearly recall every aspect of that night, including my sister's excited eyes, the sound of the rain hitting the windows, and the aroma of Mom's pot roast. She said, "Thomas and I are getting married," while displaying a massive diamond ring on her left hand that most likely cost more than my yearly wage. Dad grinned proudly as Mom sprung from her seat and hurried to embrace Sheila. Sincerely, I was also thrilled. They appeared to be a wonderful match, and Thomas came from a respectable family and treated my sister well. The revelation that would alter everything, however, came next. Sheila went on, "I've planned it all out, displaying a Pinterest board with intricate wedding-related ideas, including the location, the flowers, the outfit, and more. It'll cost about $300,000. Water choking me. $300,000. Confident that I had misheard, I sputtered. "Sheila, that's insane." The room became silent, while Sheila gazed at me with a look I had never seen before, a mix of entitlement and resolve. Mom and Dad exchanged awkward looks. Thomas offered to do something smaller. She pointed dismissively with her palm. "Just close friends and relatives," but I assured him I could pay for it myself. I want to demonstrate to this family that we are on par with them. "And exactly how are you planning to pay for this?" I inquired, but I had a strong feeling that I already knew the answer. Sheila gave a charming grin. "Of course you will assist me. You've always been there for your family." The ensuing hush was deafening. I turned to my parents, hoping they would say anything at all, to help my sister come to her senses. Rather, Dad suddenly got quite engaged in his coffee, and Mom was looking at her dish. With caution, I responded, "I can give you $20,000 for the wedding and an additional $10,000 as a wedding gift. That's a substantial sum of money already." Sheila grew gloomy. "Sabrina, that is absurd. You've got far more than that. This is my one opportunity to have the wedding of my dreams and prove to Thomas's family that I'm not some destitute girl they should despise." With despair in my voice, I turned to our parents. "Please let her know this is ridiculous, Mom and Dad. Inform her that she has nothing to prove to anybody." My heart was sliced open by what Mom said next. Honey, perhaps Sheila is right. As she grew older, we had to deny her a lot of things. She is worthy of her special day. You're just jealous, Sheila said. Jealous that I'm getting married first. Jealous that Thomas's family has money. Jealous that I'm going to have the wedding you never could. I retorted, I could have a fancy wedding if I wanted to. But in contrast to you, I recognize the importance of money. After Mark and I tie the knot, we'll have a modest ceremony and put our money aside for future plans and things that truly count, like starting a family. God, you're so self-righteous. Sheila sprang to her feet, her face flushed with rage, behaving as though you are always aware of what is best for everyone. You're simply self-centered and avaricious. With tears burning my eyes, I picked up my bag and made my way to the door. Am I avaricious? While you've been thinking of ways to spend money that isn't even yours, I've been donating half of my income to support our parents. As I stormed out into the rain, I heard Mom calling after me, but I didn't turn back. I drove home in a daze, trying to convince myself that this was just a bad dream, that my sister would come to her senses once she calmed down. 2 weeks after the disastrous dinner, I was sitting at my desk during lunch break, doing my usual monthly budget review. Mark and I were planning to grab dinner after work, and I wanted to make sure I had enough set aside. After making my regular deposit to my parents' account, I logged into online banking, clicked on the joint account, and felt my heart stop. The balance read $0. My hands were shaking as I clicked on the transaction history. There it was, a single withdrawal of $150,000, made just 3 days ago. I left work early, not even bothering to explain to my boss why it looked like I'd seen a ghost. The drive to my parents' house was a blur. I still remember gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white, trying to think of any explanation other than the obvious one. When I pulled up to their house, both their cars were in the driveway. I didn't even knock, just used my old key and burst in. Where's the money? I demanded, finding them both in the kitchen. What happened to the $150,000 in the account? Mom wouldn't meet my eyes. Dad suddenly became very interested in his coffee cup, just like at that dinner 2 weeks ago. We don't know what you're talking about, honey, Mom said quietly. Don't lie to me. I was shouting now, pulling out my phone to show them the bank statement. Someone withdrew all the money 3 days ago. I'm calling the police right now. No, Mom reached for my phone. Don't call the police. I took it. Sheila needed it for the wedding. She's marrying into a good family. We couldn't let her have a small wedding. What would they think? I laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. What would they think? They think she's marrying their son because she loves him, not because she's trying to buy their approval with my money. It's going to be fine, Mom tried to soothe me. Sheila promised she'll help us buy a new house after the wedding. She'll be married to Thomas then, and they'll have plenty of money. She's already promised to send us money every month. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you listening to yourselves? You had $150,000 saved up for a new house. We only needed another $50,000, and you could have moved out of this death trap. Instead, you gave it all away for a party, a one-day event. It's not just a party, Dad defended. It's an investment in Sheila's future. You don't understand, he continued. Once she's married to Thomas. I looked around the kitchen at the cracking walls, the sagging ceiling, the water stains in the corners, all fixable problems that now would never be fixed because my parents had chosen a fantasy over reality. You know what? I said, suddenly feeling very tired. You're right. I don't understand, and I don't want to understand. You've made your choice. Now you can live with it. That night, I barely slept. Mark held me while I cried, then helped me make a list of what needed to be done. First thing in the morning, I closed the joint account and opened a new one in just my name. Then I called Sheila. She answered on the fourth ring, sounding irritatingly cheerful. Oh, hi, Sabrina. I was just looking at wedding venues. There's this amazing place. Cut the crap, Sheila, I interrupted. I know what you did. I know about the money. There was a pause, then her voice turned cold. If Mom and Dad chose to give me the money, that's their decision. You're not in charge of them. Give it back, I said through gritted teeth. Give it back now, or I swear to God. Sheila, or what? She challenged. You'll call the police? Go ahead. Mom withdrew it legally and honestly. Sabrina, you should be happy for me. This is my dream wedding. Your dream wedding? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What about Mom and Dad's dream of having a safe place to live? Did you even think about that? Oh, please, Sheila scoffed. They'll be fine. Once I'm married to Thomas, I'll buy them whatever they need. His family has connections. We can probably get them a house for way less than market value. I laughed bitterly. You really believe that, don't you? That you'll marry into money and all your problems will be solved. What did you tell Thomas about where this money came from? There was a telling silence on the other end. He doesn't know, Bissy, I pressed. You told him you had the money yourself. Does he know you stole it from our parents' house fund? I didn't steal anything, Sheila exploded. You know what? Don't come to the wedding. I don't want you there anyway. You'll probably just try to ruin it with your jealousy and your holier-than-thou attitude. Those last words were dripping with contempt. I thought of all the times I'd helped her, the college textbooks I'd bought, the rent I'd helped her with when she was between jobs, the countless small kindnesses she'd apparently forgotten. You know what the difference is between us, Sheila? I said quietly. I don't need a $300,000 wedding to prove my worth to anyone. And when I do get married, I'll be able to look my husband in the eye, knowing I didn't lie to him about money. Whatever, she muttered. I have a meeting with the florist. Don't call me again. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone, thinking about all the times I defended Sheila to Mark when he said she was spoiled. All the times I'd made excuses for her behavior, saying she was just young and would grow out of it. Mark found me still sitting there an hour later when he came home from work. Did you talk to her? He asked gently. I nodded. She spent it on deposits and bookings that can't be refunded. And your parents? He asked. They're convinced she'll take care of them after the wedding. I laughed, but it came out more like a sob. They really believe she'll buy them a house with her rich husband's money. Mark sat down next to me. What do you want to do? Nothing, I said, surprising myself with how calm I felt. There's nothing to do. They made their choice, all three of them. Now they get to live with it. In the months that followed the confrontation, I threw myself into work and planning my own future with Mark. We found a modest house we loved and started saving for a down payment. News about Sheila's wedding preparations reached me through my Aunt Sarah, Mom's sister, who still kept in touch with both sides of our fractured family. You wouldn't believe the excess. Aunt Sarah told me over coffee one afternoon. The dress alone cost $30,000. She's having doves released during the ceremony, and there's going to be a 5-tier cake covered in real gold leaf. A week before Sheila's wedding, I got an unexpected visit at work. It was Thomas, my soon-to-be brother-in-law, looking uncomfortable in his expensive suit. Can we talk? He asked, hovering by my desk. I just found out about the money, about where it really came from. My heart skipped a beat. Oh, our parents' accountant was helping us review our finances before the wedding, he explained. He noticed some large deposits in Sheila's account and asked about their source. She broke down and told me everything. I leaned back in my chair, waiting. I had no idea. He continued. She told me she'd been saving for years for her dream wedding. I'd offered to have a smaller celebration, but she insisted she could handle it. If I'd known she took your parents' house money, as he left my office, I felt a mix of emotions I couldn't quite sort out. Part of me wanted to warn him about what he was getting into, about how Sheila had been spoiled and entitled since childhood. But another part of me knew he needed to make his own decisions. The day of Sheila's wedding arrived, a perfect sunny Saturday in June. I saw the photos on social media later, the release of white doves, the horse-drawn carriage, the champagne fountain, and the fireworks display. Everything was exactly as Sheila had dreamed, paid for with money that should have given our parents a safe place to live. That night, I lay awake thinking about my parents sitting at that lavish wedding, surrounded by wealth and excess, knowing they'd go home to a house that was literally falling down around them. 6 months after the wedding, my phone rang. It was my parents' number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Sabrina? Mom's voice sounded small and tired. Everything's bad here. The house, it's getting worse. A pipe burst in the upstairs bathroom last week, and we can't afford to fix it properly. Your father had to shut off the water to that whole floor. I stayed silent, waiting. We tried calling Sheila, she continued. She promised she'd help us after the wedding, but now she's saying they're having cash flow problems. Something about Thomas's family's business having a bad quarter. What do you want from me, Mom? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. We made a mistake, she whispered. We know that now. The plaster that fell on your father's head. He had to get 3 stitches. The doctor said we were lucky it wasn't worse. I closed my eyes, remembering the contractor's warnings from 2 years ago. Have you tried calling Sheila again? Mom's bitter laugh surprised me. She and Thomas are barely speaking to each other. They came back from their honeymoon fighting about money. Apparently, she maxed out their joint credit cards in the Maldives. Thomas's parents got involved, and well, it's not good. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I was surprised to realize I meant it not because I felt sorry for Sheila, but because our parents had sacrificed their future for her fairy tale, and now even that was falling apart. Could you maybe help us? Mom's voice cracked. Just with the pipe? We can't use the upstairs bathroom at all. And your father's back is hurting from having to go up and down the stairs to use the downstairs one at night. I thought about the house Mark and I were saving for, about the wedding we were planning. I can't, Mom. I'm not in a position to help anymore. You need to talk to Sheila. After I hung up, I called Aunt Sarah. She filled me in on what Mom hadn't told me. Sheila and Thomas were living in a luxury apartment his parents had bought them as a wedding gift, but their marriage was already showing serious cracks. Thomas had discovered Sheila had taken out several personal loans to pay for additional wedding expenses beyond the money she'd taken from our parents. Meanwhile, Dad was still working despite being past retirement age, and Mom had started looking for part-time work. They'd had to close off the entire upper floor of the house due to water damage and mold concerns. Your father's too proud to ask for help, Aunt Sarah told me. But Sarah, that house is becoming dangerous. The structural damage from the water leak is spreading. They need to either fix it or move out, but they can't afford either option. I remembered standing in that house 2 years ago with the contractors, planning how to help my parents move somewhere safe. If only they'd waited. If only they trusted me instead of Sheila's empty promises. Mark found me in our home office that evening, looking at pictures of my parents' house from before all this started. You're thinking about helping them, aren't you? He asked. No, I said firmly. I can't. Even if I wanted to, we need our savings for our own house. I won't set myself on fire to keep them warm, especially after what they did. But it's killing you to see them suffer, he observed. I turned to him, tears in my eyes. Of course it is. They're my parents, but they chose this. They chose Sheila's one-day fantasy over their own future. They chose to believe her empty promises over my real help. And now they're living with those choices. That night, I dreamed about the old house. In my dream, I was a child again, sitting in my bedroom while rain pattered against the window. But when I looked up, the ceiling was cracking, water was dripping down, and no matter how many buckets I put out, I couldn't catch all the drops. 2 years after the wedding, Aunt Sarah called me at work. Her voice was tight with tension. Sheila and Thomas are getting divorced, she said without preamble. She's moving back in with your parents. The final straw was when Thomas discovered she'd been hiding mail from his parents' credit card bills, overdue notices. She'd been secretly using their joint cards for months, even after he cut her off from them. His parents got involved. And well, the prenup is being enforced, so she gets nothing. Less than nothing, Aunt Sarah corrected. She's got about $50,000 in personal debt from the wedding loans, plus all the credit card debt she racked up trying to keep up appearances. Thomas's family is washing their hands of her completely. I thought about that $300,000 wedding, the doves, the gold leaf cake, the fireworks, all that money, my money. My parents' future gone up in smoke for a marriage that lasted barely 2 years. I closed my eyes, remembering the contractor's warnings from 3 years ago. If we'd stuck to the original plan, my parents would be in a new house by now. Instead, they were working themselves to exhaustion in their 70s, living in half a condemned house and about to take in their unemployed dead end daughter. That evening, I drove past my parents' house, not stopping, just looking. Sheila's car was already in the driveway, a luxury model she clearly couldn't afford anymore. Through the windows, I could see lights on downstairs, shadows moving my sister, back in our childhood home, but not the way any of us had imagined. The next day, I ran into Sheila at the grocery store where Mom worked. She looked different. The designer clothes and perfect manicure were gone, replaced by jeans and chipped nail polish. She saw me but quickly turned away, pushing her cart down another aisle. Today, I'm getting married. As I stand in front of the mirror in my simple white dress, nothing like Sheila's $30,000 designer gown, I think about how different my path has been from my sister's. Mark and I are having our ceremony at the courthouse with only Aunt Sarah and his immediate family present. Afterward, we'll have dinner at our favorite restaurant. The whole thing will cost less than what Sheila spent on her wedding flowers alone. Are you sure you don't want to invite them? Mark asked last night, meaning my parents and Sheila. I shook my head. They made their choice 3 years ago. I'm making mine now. The last update I got from Aunt Sarah painted a grim picture. The house was officially condemned last month. My parents had to move into a small 2-bedroom apartment with Sheila, using what little savings they had left for the security deposit. Mom is still working at the grocery store. Dad finally had to retire due to health issues, and Sheila is working as a waitress, trying to pay off her mountain of debt. Your mother asks about you. Aunt Sarah told me recently. She keeps the announcement of your courthouse wedding on her nightstand. I'd sent the announcement through Aunt Sarah, not directly to them. It wasn't an invitation, just a notification that I was getting married. Mom had tried to call after receiving it, but I let it go to voicemail. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. They understand now, Aunt Sarah said. They know they made a terrible mistake, choosing one daughter's fantasy over the other daughter's reality. But understanding doesn't change anything. It doesn't bring back the $150,000 they gave away. It doesn't repair their condemned house. It doesn't erase the fact that they betrayed my trust in the worst possible way. Sheila is still living with them, working double shifts to make minimum payments on her wedding debt. The luxury apartment, designer clothes, and expensive car are all gone. Sometimes she posts on social media about learning life lessons and the true meaning of family, but I've muted her accounts. Her words ring hollow after everything that's happened. Yesterday, a package arrived from my parents, a wedding gift. I'd almost sent it back unopened, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was Mom's old pearl necklace, the only valuable thing she had left, with a note. We should have trusted you. We should have seen who you really were, the responsible one, the caring one, the one who tried to give us a real future instead of a one-day dream. We're so sorry. We love you. I returned the jewelry to its box. I might wear it eventually, but not today. Mark got me a modest silver pendant for our first anniversary, which I'm wearing today. It's genuine, like our love, like our ambitions, like our future, yet it's not costly or ostentatious. Following the wedding, Mark and I will return home to the house we were able to purchase with our savings. This modest 3-bedroom home in a quiet neighborhood isn't particularly glamorous, but it belongs to us since it was constructed on honest effort and thorough planning rather than on fantasies and plans. Ready? Mark peers into the room and asks. I give the mirror one last glance. I picked up my flowers this morning from the neighborhood florist. My outfit is basic, and my makeup is minimal. I'm being married to a man I love, surrounded by friends I trust, and beginning a life grounded in reality rather than fantasy. nothing like Sheila's extravagant celebration. When I say ready, I mean it. I reflect on the lessons I've learned from all of this as we make our way to the courthouse, that certain people can drain you if you allow them to, that parents may love their kids too much in all the wrong ways, and that a single poor choice can ruin decades of hard work and trust. However, I have also learned about my own strength, which is the ability to establish limits, choose truth over imagination, and construct a firm foundation rather than a changing sands. I'm Claire, and I never imagined that I would be sharing this tale. I was a normal second-year college student at 19, juggling schoolwork and a social life while occasionally experiencing homesickness. However, one phone call that completely upended my existence altered everything. I should probably start at the beginning. When I was 17 years old, 2 years ago, my father died unexpectedly. After that, Dad had worked so hard to build us a house, and it was just Mom and me. With funds and the house paid off in full, he left us in good hands. I assumed that the two of us would be okay. It was bittersweet when I was admitted to an out-of-state institution. Mom said that Dad would have wanted me to follow my aspirations, which I did, only returning home for vacations and breaks. Everything appeared to be all right at first. Mom looked to be managing things well, and we would frequently video talk. Then, during one of our talks a few months back, she revealed something shocking. She said, "Claire, honey, I've met someone," in an abnormally excited, high-pitched voice. "His name is Robert, and well, we're getting married." I almost dropped my phone. "Are you married? How long did you know him, Mom?" She nonchalantly responded, "Oh, about 3 months," as though she were discussing a new hairstyle with me. "But when you know, you know." I truly tried to be helpful, but there was something strange about the whole event. Nevertheless, I told myself that it was fantastic that Mom was getting over her past and finding happiness once more. After Robert came into our home, I made an effort to accept that Dad's place was now occupied by a stranger. Life continued. I attempted to ignore the persistent sense that something wasn't right and concentrated on my schoolwork. The call that would alter everything then arrived. It was just another typical Tuesday afternoon. My phone buzzed as I was wrapping up my last lesson. Our next-door neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, had owned the number since before I was even born. "Claire, is that you?" She spoke in an anxious, strained tone. "Your home is experiencing an odd situation. For days now, individuals have been coming and leaving, bringing in new items, changing furniture, and—" her voice trailed off to a whisper as she hesitated. "I haven't seen your mother in over a week." I tried contacting Mom right away, but nobody picked up. I kept trying, but to no avail. The number was then disconnected after 5 attempts. The terror really started at that point. In order to obtain emergency leave, I hurried to my dorm room, packed some clothing in a bag, and went directly to the administrative office. In less than an hour, I was riding a train home while attempting to persuade myself that there must be a plausible rationale for everything while I watched the scenery pass by my window. The train travel seemed to go on forever. I left voicemail after voicemail, attempting to get through to Mom for the majority of it. My hands were trembling so much that I could hardly grasp my phone when I eventually arrived at our street. When I turned the corner, Dad's house was in sight. Every year until I was 16, he measured my height on the kitchen door frame and spent weekends patching it up. However, something had changed. The flower beds Mom had usually kept so tidy were already beginning to look messy, and there was a strange automobile in the driveway. As I approached, I saw a couple standing on our front porch as if they were supposed to be there. While the guy tinkled with the porch light, the wife watered the remnants of Mom's petunias. "Excuse me," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "What are you doing at my house?" They turned to look at me, exchanging glances before the man spoke up. "Your house. I'm sorry, but we bought this property a few days ago." He disappeared inside for a moment and came back with a folder. "Here are the documents, all signed and notarized. The seller was Sarah Mitchell. Is that your mother?" I grabbed the papers with trembling hands. There it was, in black and white, Mom's flowing signature at the bottom of a sales contract. The date stamp was just 3 days ago. There must be some mistake, I whispered, mourned myself into them. She wouldn't, she couldn't. The couple looked uncomfortable. The woman stepped forward, her face sympathetic. Listen, honey, we had no idea there was any issue. The sale went through proper channels. Everything was legal. Your mother didn't mention. I wasn't listening anymore. I was already dialing Mom's number again, and this time, finally, she picked up. Mom, what the hell is going on? My voice cracked. There are people at our house saying they bought it. Tell me this is some kind of mistake. Claire, her voice was cool, detached. It's my house. The deed was in my name, and I had every right to sell it. Robert and I have decided to spend some time abroad. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Your house? Dad built that house. It was meant for all of us. Where am I supposed to go during breaks? How could you do this without even talking to me? Oh, sweetie, her tone was condescending. Now you're an adult. Now you can take care of yourself, and your father left everything to me, not you. The will was very clear about that. My head was spinning. What about all our stuff? Dad's things? My things? I sold the furniture and appliances. She paused, and I heard the sound of paper shuffling. As for your personal belongings, she paused again. I had them moved to a storage unit. I'm texting you the box number and lock code now. Everything else has been dealt with. My phone buzzed with an incoming text, the storage unit details. I assumed I stood there on the sidewalk, staring at not our house anymore. The new owners had retreated inside, probably wanting to avoid the family drama playing out on their front lawn. The storage facility was on the outskirts of town, a maze of identical metal doors and concrete walls. When I pulled up the rolling door, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. There was no organization, no caretaking at all, just my entire life thrown together like garbage. My books were scattered across the concrete floor, some with bent pages and damaged covers. The scrapbook I'd made with Dad during my junior year of high school was lying face down in a corner, its spine cracked. No, 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 I muttered, rushing forward to rescue a pile of photos that had been carelessly tossed into a black garbage bag. As I pulled them out, I realized some were already wrinkled and creased beyond repair. My clothes were stuffed into more garbage bags, all jumbled together, winter coats with summer dresses, clean with dirty. The teddy bear Dad had given me on my 5th birthday was squashed under a bag of shoes. When I pulled it out, one of its eyes was hanging by a thread. With trembling fingers, I pulled out my phone and called the one person I knew would understand Grandma. The whole story came pouring out. The house, the storage unit, everything. Grandma listened quietly until I finished. Then I heard her take a deep breath. That ungrateful daughter of mine, she said, her voice tight with anger. Claire, listen to me. I want you to come to my house right now. But my things? We'll handle your things. I'm calling a moving company right now to send over a mini truck. You just start gathering everything up, okay? We'll sort it all out here. 2 hours later, I was following a small rental truck down the highway to Grandma's house in the next town over. She was waiting on her front porch when we pulled up, and she wrapped me in one of her fierce hugs the moment I stepped out of my car. We spent the rest of the day trying to reach Mom. Call after call went straight to voicemail. Grandma left increasingly angry messages, but there was no response. Don't you worry about a thing, Grandma said, as we sat in her kitchen that evening, mugs of hot chocolate in front of us, just like when I was little. You can stay here whenever you need to, holidays, weekends, anytime. This is your home now. That night, lying in Grandma's guest room, I made the mistake of checking social media. There was Mom, posting pictures from some fancy resort in Europe. She and Robert were posing by a pool, cocktails in hand, looking like they didn't have a care in the world. I stared at the phone until my vision blurred with tears. Then, with quick, angry movements, I blocked her on every platform I could think of. She could throw away our relationship as easily as she'd thrown my things into that storage. Then I could delete her from my life just as easily. The next year is passed in a blur of classes, part-time jobs, and weekend visits to Grandma's house. She became my rock, the one constant I could count on. We talked on the phone several times a week, and she never failed to ask about my classes or remind me to eat properly. I was deep into my final year of college when I got the call. It was a Tuesday morning, just like that day years ago when everything with Mom had fallen apart. But this time, it was Grandma's neighbor, Mrs. Reynolds. "Claire, honey," her voice broke. "Your grandmother? She had a heart attack last night." The paramedics tried. But the world stopped spinning. I don't remember much about the drive to Grandma's town, just that somehow I made it there in one piece. The house looked exactly the same as it had during my last visit 2 weeks ago. The wind chimes she loved were still tinkling on the porch. Her garden gloves were still draped over the railing where she'd left them. I had to handle all the funeral arrangements. Some people asked if I was going to inform Mom, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. The thought of seeing her, of having to deal with her during this, I just couldn't. Besides, I knew how small towns worked. Someone would tell her anyway, probably already had. The funeral was beautiful, just like Grandma would have wanted, simple but elegant, with all her favorite flowers. I stood there, accepting condolences from what felt like the entire town, when a tall man in a crisp suit approached me. "Miss Claire Mitchell," he said. He handed me his business card. "I'm James Wilson, your grandmother's attorney. I need to speak with you about her will at your earliest convenience." I stared at the card. Shouldn't we wait for my mother? She'll probably show up soon, wanting her share. Mr. Wilson shook his head. "That won't be necessary. The will concerns only one person. You." The next day, I sat in his office, still numb from everything. The words of the will washed over me like waves. "To my beloved granddaughter, Claire Mitchell, I leave my entire estate." She also left another letter for me. My hand shook as I opened it. The paper still smelled like Grandma's perfume. "My dearest Claire," it began. "If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to tell you in person how proud I am of you, how much I love you. I want you to understand why I've made this decision. When your mother abandoned you for a man she barely knew, it broke my heart. I had always planned to split my estate between you and her, but watching her squander your father's hard-earned money, seeing how easily she threw away the house he built with such love, I knew I couldn't trust her with the legacy I've spent decades building. You, my sweet girl, have shown strength, resilience, and grace beyond your years. You've worked hard, stayed focused on your education, just like your father always wanted. I choose you, Claire, not just as my heir, but as the daughter of my heart. The house and all my savings, $300,000, are yours. Use them wisely, build the life you deserve, and know that wherever I am, I'm watching over you with love and pride. All my love, Grandma." After the funeral, reality set in quickly. I still had a year of college to finish, and Grandma's house couldn't just sit empty. The property taxes and utilities would stack up, and besides, an empty house tends to attract trouble. After a lot of thought, I contacted a local realtor named Linda Barrett to handle renting it out. "I'll send you weekly updates," Linda promised as I headed back to college. "And of course, I'll call immediately if there are any issues." The first couple of months went smoothly. Linda found a nice young couple with a baby on the way. They signed a 1-year lease and moved in right away. I threw myself back into my studies, trying to focus on finals and job applications instead of the empty space Grandma had left behind. Then came the call. "Claire." Linda's voice was tense. "We've had an incident at the house. A woman showed up yesterday causing quite a scene. She was screaming that she was the rightful owner of the house, trying to get in through the back door. The tenants were terrified. They had to call the police." I closed my eyes, already knowing. What did she look like? Middle-aged, well-dressed, but kind of disheveled. Dark hair, about 5'6". "That's my mother," I said flatly. "And she's not going to stop." I was right. Within days, my phone started blowing up with calls from unknown numbers. I ignored them all, but the voicemails piled up. Claire, this is your mother. Call me back immediately. Claire, we need to discuss the inheritance. Now. You can't ignore me forever, young lady. Call me back, or I'll make things very difficult for you. I blocked number after number, but she kept finding new ones to contact me from. I started having trouble sleeping, jumping every time my phone buzzed. My grades started slipping, and my professors noticed I was distracted in class. Then, exactly 1 week after the incident at the house, I was walking across campus to my morning class when I heard a familiar voice. Claire. I froze. There she was, standing by the student center like she had every right to be there. Mom looked different. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by off-the-rack pieces that didn't quite fit right. Her hair, usually perfectly styled, was frizzing in the morning humidity. I'll make a scene right here if I have to, she yelled. Is that what you want? Your mother screaming in front of all your classmates about how you stole her inheritance. I looked around. People were already staring. The last thing I needed was to become campus gossip fodder. Fine, I said through gritted teeth. There's a cafe around the corner. 10 minutes. That's all you get. The cafe was busy with the morning rush, but Mom managed to find a table in a corner. I sat down across from her, keeping my bag on my lap, ready to leave at any moment. Let's cut to the chase, she said, not even bothering to ask how I'd been. I know about the inheritance. I was her daughter, her only daughter. You're just the granddaughter. Obviously, this inheritance needs to be split between us, 50-50ths. It's the right thing to do, and you know it. Like how you did the right thing when you sold Dad's house. The words came out sharp and bitter. The house he built for us. The one that should have been half mine. Her face flushed red. That was completely different. I was the owner, just like Grandma was the owner of her house. I cut in. And she chose who to leave it to. This is not the same thing at all. Mom's voice was getting louder, drawing attention from nearby tables. I will not let you steal what's rightfully mine. I'll sue you if I have to. Go ahead, I said, though my hands were shaking under the table. The will is perfectly clear. She switched tactics then, her face softening into a familiar, manipulative expression. After everything I've done for you, Claire, I've paid for your college education. I couldn't help it. I laughed. You never worked a day in your life, Mom. You transferred money from Dad's account to pay for my tuition money he left for my education. How dare you? She slammed her hand on the table, making the cups rattle. You ungrateful little? I'm done here. I stood up, grabbing my bag. Don't contact me again. I pushed through the door, her stream of obscenities following me out onto the street. Several customers were recording on their phones. Great, just what I needed. Back in my dorm room, I made the mistake of checking social media. Mom had already posted a novel-length rant. I never thought my own daughter would betray me like this. She manipulated my poor mother, turned her against me, and stole what should have been mine. My own flesh and blood conspiring behind my back. The comment section quickly turned into a battlefield. Mom's siblings and cousins jumped in, calling me names and demanding I do the right thing. But Dad's family fought back hard. Sarah, we all remember how you abandoned Claire and ran off with that man, my Aunt Susan wrote. Sold Claire's childhood home out from under her and jetted off to Europe. Shame on you. Some more distant relatives and family friends tried to be voices of reason. If you're so sure you have a claim, take it to court, one commented. Throwing accusations on Facebook isn't going to change a legal will. But Mom kept going, post after post, each one more dramatic than the last. She painted herself as the victim of a grand conspiracy between me and Grandma, conveniently leaving out how she treated me these past few years. After graduation, I finally returned to Grandma's house, my house now. The tenants had moved out the week before, leaving everything surprisingly well maintained. Standing in the empty living room, I could almost hear Grandma's laugh echoing off the walls. I decided to take a few months off before job hunting. The inheritance meant I could afford to breathe a little, and the house needed some work. Nothing major, just the kind of minor repairs that pile up over time, a squeaky floorboard here, a dripping faucet there. It felt good to keep my hands busy, to make the space truly mine. I was in the middle of repainting the kitchen when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I figured it might be one of Grandma's old neighbors coming to say hello. I wiped my paint-covered hands on my overalls and headed for the door. The moment I opened it, my stomach dropped. There stood Mom, looking nothing like the polished woman I remembered. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes wrinkled, and her mascara was running down her cheeks. "Claire," she sobbed, pushing past me into the house before I could stop her. "You have to help me. I have nowhere else to go." "What are you talking about?" I stayed by the open door, keeping my escape route clear. "Robert left me," she wailed, sinking onto Grandma's old couch. "He took everything. I'm broke, Claire. I need a place to stay. Just until I get back on my feet. Maybe a loan." I stared at her in disbelief. "You're kidding me," I said. "I'm your mother," she cried. "You can't just leave me on the street like you left me." The words came out sharp and cold. "Like you abandoned me and ran off with Robert and all that money from Dad's house." She sat up straighter, wiping her eyes. "That's different. You were an adult already. You weren't going to starve, right? Because Grandma took me in. The same Grandma whose house you're now trying to guilt your way into." "You don't understand," she said, really crying now. "Robert, he forced me to sell the house. He was controlling, manipulative. He bullied me into everything. I was a victim too." I pulled out my phone, opened her social media profile, and held it up. "Really? Is that why you posted this yesterday?" There was a photo of her and Robert at some fancy restaurant, his arm around her as she beamed at the camera. The caption read, "Date night with my soulmate." And this one from last week. I swiped to another photo, and these hundreds of others, showing how bullied and miserable she'd been. Mom's face changed. The tears stopped instantly, replaced by something ugly and hard. "You little trash," she snarled, standing up. "I should have had an abortion when I had the chance. You're nothing but a greedy, ungrateful. Get out." My voice was shaking, but I held my ground. "I never want to see you again. Ever. You'll regret this," she spat as she stormed past me. "You're just like your father, selfish." I slammed the door in her face, cutting off whatever cruel thing she was about to say next. Through the wood, I could hear her continuing to scream, but I just slid down to sit on the floor, my back against the door, and waited until she finally went away. The aftermath of Mom's visit was exactly what I expected. My phone exploded with messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in years, everyone suddenly concerned about poor Sarah and her difficult situation. Every date brought new guilt trips, new accusations. Linda called to tell me how Mom was crying herself to sleep. Cousin Rachel sent long texts about family obligations and Christian forgiveness. Uncle Tom wrote a whole email about how I was tearing the family apart. I decided I had enough at that point. From the day she sold our house to her most recent attempt to defraud Grandma into letting me stay in her house, I sat down at my computer and typed down the entire tale. I sent screenshots of her vacation posts from Europe shortly after she had left me homeless, pictures of the storage facility where she had disposed of my belongings, and, last but not least, a scanned copy of Grandma's letter. I made everything publicly available. No more concealing. No more allowing Mom to steer the story. The reaction was instantaneous. Mom's family fell quiet. The warnings about guilt tripping ceased. Grandma's own comments were too strong for even her most ardent supporters to dispute. 6 months have passed since then. I completed the house's renovations. Nothing extravagant now, simply claiming it as mine while preserving Grandma's touches that gave it a homey feel. I'm making a life for myself and have landed a decent position at a nearby marketing company. I learned tidbits about Mom thanks to the family gossip. She lives in a little apartment that she can hardly afford in the next state over. The majority of their money was taken with Robert when he really left her. She is working as a store clerk for the first time in her life, after having to sell her jewels and luxury clothing. Sometimes on calm evenings, I sit in Grandma's garden and think about how Mom must have mentally prepared everything. Given that she had Grandma's fortune as a fallback, she most likely believed she would squander Dad's money and live the high life with Robert. She made the decision to savor the now, spending recklessly and without considering the repercussions. I discovered an old photo album in the attic the other day. A photo of Mom holding me as a newborn with us both grinning at the camera was there. I briefly had the old, familiar pain of wishing things had turned out differently. Then I recalled what Grandma had said. Sometimes the right thing is also the toughest thing. I put the album back in the attic after closing it. I'm concentrating on the future for the time being, but maybe I'll want to take another look at it later. My future. In this house full of memories of the people who truly loved me, not just when it was convenient, but always I'm constructing the one I want, on my own terms.